We're live. We're live. It's Wednesday. We're going to adjust a little bit. Just a little. Hi. Hello. Oh, maybe too much. We'll play with the other one just a touch. Hi. If you are here, say hello because I am really excited about tonight. It is 2026. It is our Hey Jax. And my sister. I got a couple of incredible gifts, which if you guys were here last week, you heard me gush about. And this is one of them. I get to start sharing it with you guys. And I was looking solely at like page count, and I think we're going to do 2 tonight because the first 2 are relatively short. It's 2 different authors, but we have so many stories. So many stories. I apologize for my nails if you guys saw them. It was the last thing. It didn't get done before tonight. But it's okay. Next week, it'll look great. Hi. I hope you guys had a great holiday season. I know it seems like really long and yet not long enough. Um, but that is just the way it is. I have some cool things coming up. Keep an eye on Facebook page. Hey girl, hey. Hey girl, hey. I am gonna be interviewed. This is so cool. Okay, so I was on a podcast Monday night. I'm gonna be interviewed by or on for a radio show that is based out of Long Island. Oh, so like we're getting out of Indiana, y'all. We're branching out of the Midwest. I'm so nervous and excited. So that is Sunday morning, 9 a.m. And yeah. So yeah, there will definitely be a Facebook post leading up to that. But yeah, that's so cool. Heidi, that is true. It is very true. However, there are not as many anyway. It's going to lead to hopefully some new opportunities. Get some more projects going for this year. This is going to be a big year, guys. I talked about it last week. I talked about it Monday night on the podcast. It's just nerve-sided. That is a great word, nerve-sided. What Ash said. Yeah. I can feel it. So, yes, we are going to we're going to grow our community this year. I have issued a challenge. If you saw the reel on Facebook earlier, for the spring equinox. Success. I would like to be at 125 subscribers by March 1st. It's less than 50 from where we are. So it's doable. If you guys all share. Jonathan, share your favorite video. We've been doing this for 7 months now. 8 months. I'm going to have to go back and check the first video this year. You did make it. Oh, okay. We have a new member tonight. That's very exciting. Yay! Hi, Kelly. Okay. Everybody, read the chat. Oh my gosh, you guys are cracking me up. I love that you guys interact with each other. So anyway, back to what we are actually here for. It's our story tonight. Woohoo! Our 2 stories tonight. So the first one that we are going to read was written by Washington Irving. So Sleepy Hollow and all that jazz. And it is called The Adventure of My Aunt. And then our second one tonight was written by Alexander S. Pushkin, and it is The Queen of Spades. So yeah, we'll get started on our stories. I hope you guys all have a drink, a little something to snack on maybe. I have a soda. And we will get started with The Adventure of My Aunt. My aunt was a lady of large frame, strong mind, and great resolution. She was what might be termed a very manly woman. My uncle was a thin, puny little man, very meek and acquiescent, and no match for my aunt. It was observed that he dwindled and dwindled gradually away from the day of his marriage. His wife's powerful mind was too much for him. It wore him out. My aunt, however, took all possible care of him, had half the doctors in town to prescribe for him, made him take all their prescriptions willy-nilly, and dosed him with physic enough to cure a whole hospital. All was in vain. My uncle grew worse and worse the more dosing and nursing he underwent, until in the end he added another to the long list of matrimonial victims who have been killed with kindness. And was it his ghost that appeared to her? Asked the inquisitive gentleman who had questioned the former storyteller. You shall hear, replied the narrator. My aunt took on mightily for the death of her poor dear husband. Perhaps she felt some compunction at having given him so much physic and nursed him into his grave. At any rate, she did all that a widow could do to honor his memory. She spared no expense in either the quality or quantity of her mourning weeds. She wore a miniature of him around her neck, as large as a little sundial, and she had a full-length portrait of him always hanging in her bedchamber. All the world extolled her conduct to the skies, and it was determined that a woman who behaved so well to the memory of one husband deserved soon to get another. It was not long after this that she went to take up her residence in an old country seat in Derbyshire, which had long been in the care of merely a steward and housekeeper. She took most of her servants with her, intending to make it her principal abode. The house stood in a lonely, wild part of the country among the gray Derbyshire hills, with a murderer hanging in chains on a bleak height in full view. Sometimes I forget how long ago these stories were written. Yeah, people just hanging outside of town, so everybody knows. The servants from town were half frightened out of their wits at the idea of living in such a dismal, pagan-looking place, especially when they got together in the servants' hall in the evening and compared notes on all the hobgoblin stories they had picked up in the course of the day. They were afraid to venture alone about the forlorn, black-looking chambers. My lady's maid, who was troubled with nerves, declared she could never sleep alone in such a gashly rummaging old building, and the footman, who was a kind-hearted young fellow, did all in his power to cheer her up. My aunt herself seemed to be struck with the lonely appearance of the house. Before she went to bed, therefore, she examined well the fastenings of the doors and windows, locked up the plate with her own hands, and carried the keys, together with a little box of money and jewels, to her own room, for she was a notable woman, and always saw to all things herself. Having put the keys under her pillow, and dismissed her maid, she sat by her toilet arranging her hair, for, being in spite of her grief for my uncle, rather a buxom widow, she was a little particular about her person. She sat for a little while looking at her face in the glass, first on one side, then on the other, as ladies are apt to do when they would ascertain if they have been in good looks. For a roistering country squire of the neighborhood, with whom she had flirted when a girl, had called that day to welcome her to the country. A little flirtation makes you look a little harder in the mirror. Aw, I didn't let the kitties in. Leonard has been a bit rambunctious the last couple of days. All of a sudden, she thought she heard something move behind her. She looked hastily round, but there was nothing to be seen. Nothing but the grimly painted portrait of her poor dear man, which had been hung against the wall. She gave a heavy sigh to his memory, as she was accustomed to do whenever she spoke of him in company, and went on adjusting her nightdress. Her sigh was re-echoed, or answered by a long-drawn breath. She looked round again, but no one was to be seen. She ascribed these sounds to the wind oozing through the rat holes of the old mansion, and proceeded leisurely to put her hair in papers, when all at once she thought she perceived one of the eyes of the portraits move. "The back of her head being toward it," said the storyteller with the ruined head, giving a knowing wink on the sound side of his visage. "Good." "Yes, sir," replied dryly the narrator. "Her back being toward the portrait, but her eye fixed on its reflection in the glass." Ooh, see, that's even scarier. That's why I seriously, I don't have pictures behind, like, face pictures. I don't have any in here. I have one weird thing on the other wall, which you can see if you get on the other podcast tomorrow night. But yeah, no, I don't like looking in a mirror and having like a face behind me. Nope. I'd be aware of everything. I'd be so scared the eyes would move. No, thank you. Well, as I was saying, she perceived one of the eyes of the portrait move. So strange a circumstance, as you may well suppose, gave her a sudden shock. To assure herself cautiously of the fact, she put one hand to her forehead, as if rubbing it, peeped through her fingers, and moved the candle with the other hand. The light of the taper gleamed on the eye and was reflected from it. She was sure it moved. Nay, more, it seemed to give a wink, as if she had sometimes known her husband to do when living. It struck a momentary chill to her heart, for she was a lone woman and felt herself fearfully situated. The chill was but transient. My aunt, who was almost as resolute a personage as your uncle, sir, turning to the old storyteller, became instantly calm and collected. She went on adjusting her dress. She even hummed a favorite air and did not make a single false note. She casually overturned a dressing box, took a candle, and picked up the articles leisurely, one by one from the floor, pursued a rolling pincushion that was making the best of its way under the bed, then opened the door. She looked outside for an instant into the corridor, as if in doubt whether to go, and then walked quietly out. She hastened downstairs, ordered the servants to arm themselves with the first weapons that came to hand, placed herself at their head, and returned almost immediately. Yeah, she's not going to be scared of ghosts. She's afraid there's somebody in the walls looking through, which is creepier. Gross. No, no, thank you. Her hastily levied army presented a formidable force. The steward had a rusty blunderbuss, the coachman a loaded whip, the footman a pair of horse pistols, the cook a huge chopping knife, and the butler a bottle in each hand. My aunt led the van with a red-hot poker, and in my opinion was the most formidable of the party. The waiting maid brought up the rear, dreading to stay alone in the servants' hall, smelling to a broken bottle of volatile salts, and expressing her terror of the ghostesses. It actually does say ghostesses, which is awesome. Hmm. Sorry, guys. I was catching up in the chat, and you guys, I love you so much. Ghosts, said my aunt resolutely. I'll singe their whiskers for them. They entered the chamber. All was still and undisturbed as when she left it. They approached the portrait of my uncle. Pull me down that picture, cried my aunt. A heavy groan and a sound like the chattering of teeth was heard from the portrait. The servant shrunk back. The maid uttered a faint shriek and clung to the footman. Instantly, added my aunt with a stamp of the foot. The picture was pulled down, and from a recess behind it, in which had formerly stood a clock, they hauled forth a round-shouldered, black-bearded varlet with a knife as long as my arm, but trembling all over like an aspen leaf. Well, and who was he? No ghost, I suppose, said the inquisitive gentleman. A knight of the post, replied the narrator, who had been smitten with the worth of the wealthy widow, or rather a marauding Tarquin who had stolen into her chamber to violate her purse and rifle her strong-box when all the house should be asleep. In plain terms, continued he, the vagabond was a loose, idle fellow of the neighborhood, who had once been a servant in the house, and had been employed to assist in arranging it for the reception of its mistress. He confessed that he had contrived his hiding place for his nefarious purposes, and had borrowed an eye from the portrait by way of reconnoitering hole. Reconnoitering hole. Pardon me. And what did they do with him? Did they hang him? Resumed the questioner. Hang him? How could they? Exclaimed a beetle-browed barrister with a hawk's nose. The offense was not capital. No robbery nor assault had been committed. No forcible entry or breaking into the premises. My aunt, said the narrator, was a woman of spirit, and apt to take the law into her own hands. She had her own notions of cleanliness also. She ordered the fellow to be drawn through the horse pond to cleanse away all offenses, and then to be well rubbed down with an oaken towel. And what became of him afterwards? Said the inquisitive gentleman. I do not exactly know. I believe he was sent on a voyage of improvement to Botany Bay. And your aunt? Said the inquisitive gentleman. I'll warrant she took care to make her maid sleep in the room with her after that. No, sir, she did better. She gave her hand shortly after to the roistering squire, for she used to observe it was a dismal thing for a woman to sleep alone in the country. She was right, observed the inquisitive gentleman, nodding his head sagaciously. But I am sorry they did not hang that fellow. It was agreed on all hands that the last narrator had brought his tale to the most satisfactory conclusion, though a country clergyman present regretted that the aunt and uncle, who figured in the different stories, had not been married together. They certainly would have been well matched. But I don't see, after all, said the inquisitive gentleman, that there was any ghost in this last story. Oh, we're probably going to have to get the rest of this book. Oh, no. Oh, if it's ghosts you want, honey, cried the Irish captain of dragoons. If it's ghosts you want, he shall have a whole regiment of 'em. And since these gentlemen have been given the adventures of their aunts and uncles, faith, and I'll even give you a chapter 2 out of my own family history. All right. I love it when they throw an accent at the end. Oh, that was a good one. I like Washington Irving stories. And no, it wasn't ghosty. But we may have to find the rest of that book and sprinkle it in. The ghostest with the mostest. Oh, you guys. Did you like that one? Should we do some more Washington Irving? Should we for sure do the Headless Horseman? Maybe. I might have it around here somewhere. Yes, do. All right, Kelly, just for you, because you're here and you're commenting. We'll put it on the list. So our next story. So Alexander Pushkin, according to this, lived from 1799 to 1837. So, okay. So this, written in 1833. This was originally published in a Russian literary magazine. I had to look because I've not ever heard of this story. The 13th Archangel. Curious. Okay, so this story is called The Queen of Spades. I will apologize now. No, I will not. Kelly, this is going to be your introduction to my mispronunciation of things. I hope you enjoy. I will get the googles at some point during the story, probably, at something that I desperately mispronounce. And I'm not sure if my linguistics guy has any assistance for Russian. It's not Irish. Awesome. Okay, well, buckle up. Get your drinks back out. The Queen of Spades. At the house of Naramov, a cavalry officer, the long winter night had been passed in gambling. At 5 a.m, breakfast was served to the weary players. The winners ate with relish. The losers, on the contrary, pushed back their plates and sat brooding gloomily. Under the influence of the good wine, however, the conversation then became general. "Well, Serene," said the host inquiringly. "Oh, I lost as usual. My luck is abominable. No matter how cool I keep, I never win." "How is it, Herman, that you never touch a card?" remarked one of the men, addressing a young officer of the engineering corps. "Here you are with the rest of us at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you have neither played nor bet all night." "Play interests me greatly," replied the person addressed, "but I hardly care to sacrifice the necessaries of life for uncertain superfluities. Herman is a German, therefore economical. That explains it, said Tomsky. But the person I can't quite understand is my grandmother, the Countess Anna Fedorovna. "Why?" inquired a chorus of voices. "I can't understand why my grandmother never gambles." I don't see anything very striking in the fact that a woman of 80 refuses to gamble, objected Naramov. Have you ever heard her story? No. Well, then, listen to it. To begin with, 60 years ago, my grandmother went to Paris, where she was all the fashion. People crowded each other in the streets to get a chance to see the Muscovite Venus, as she was called. All the great ladies played Pharaoh then. On one occasion, while playing with the Duke of Orleans, she lost an enormous sum. She told her husband of the debt, but he refused outright to pay it. Nothing could induce him to change his mind on the subject, and grandmother was at her wits' end. Finally, she remembered a friend of hers, Count Saint Germain. You may have heard of him, as many wonderful stories have been told about him. He is said to have discovered the elixir of life, the philosopher's stone, and many other equally marvelous things. He had money at his disposal, and my grandmother knew it. She sent him a note asking him to come to see her. He obeyed her summons and found her in great distress. She painted the cruelty of her husband in the darkest colors and ended by telling the Count that she depended upon his friendship and generosity. I could lend you the money, replied the Count after a moment of thoughtfulness, but I know you would not enjoy a moment's rest until you had returned it, and it would only add to your embarrassment. There is another way of freeing yourself. But, yes, Count Saint Germain, absolutely. But I have no money at all, insisted my grandmother. There's no need of money. Listen to me. The Count then told her a secret which any of us would give a good deal to know. The young gamesters were all attention. Tomsky lit his pipe, took a few whiffs, then continued. The next evening, grandmother appeared at Versailles at the Queen's gambling table. The Duke of Orleans was the dealer. Grandmother made some excuse for not having brought any money and began to pout. Oh, began to punt, excuse me. She chose 3 cards in succession, again and again, winning every time, and was soon out of debt. A fable, replied Herman. Perhaps the cards were marked. I hardly think so, replied Tomsky with an air of importance. So, you have a grandmother who knows 3 winning cards, and you haven't found out the magic secret. I must say I have not. She had 4 sons, one of them being my father, all of whom are devoted to play. She never told the secret to one of them. But my uncle told me this much, on his word of honor. Chaplitsky, who died in poverty after having squandered millions, lost at one time at play nearly 300,000 rubles. He was desperate, and grandmother took pity on him. She told him the 3 cards, making him swear never to use them again. He returned to the game, staked 50,000 rubles on each card, and came out ahead after paying his debts. As day was dawning, the party was now breaking up, each one draining his glass and taking his leave. The Countess Anna Fedorova was seated before her mirror in her dressing room. 3 women were assisting at her toilet. The old countess no longer made the slightest pretenses to beauty, but she still clung to all the habits of her youth and spent as much time at her toilet as she had done 60 years before. I'm probably going to be that old lady. At the window, a young girl, her ward, sat at her needlework. Good afternoon, grandmother, cried a young officer who had just entered the room. I've come to ask a favor of you. What, Pavel? I want to be allowed to present one of my friends to you, and to take you to the ball on Tuesday night. Take me to the ball and present me to him there. After a few more remarks, the officer walked up to the window where Lisaveta Ivanova sat. Whom do you wish to present? Asked the girl. Naramov. Do you know him? No. Is he a soldier? Yes. An engineer? No. Why do you ask? The girl smiled and made no reply. I'm just as confused as Pavel. Kelly, that is such an incredibly true statement. Incredibly true. Pavel Tomsky took his leave, and left to herself, Lizaveta glanced out of the window. Soon, another young officer appeared at the corner of the street. The girl blushed and bent her head low over her canvas. This appearance of the officer had become a daily occurrence. The man was totally unknown to her, and as she was not accustomed to coquetting with the soldiers she saw on the street, she hardly knew how to explain his presence. His persistence finally roused an interest entirely strange to her. One day, she even ventured to smile upon her admirer, for such he seemed to be. The reader need hardly be told that the officer was no other than Herman, the would-be gambler, whose imagination had been strongly excited by the story told by Tomsky of the 3 magic cards. Alan, you may have to do some research. He thought, if the old countess would only reveal the secret to me. Why not try to win her goodwill and appeal to her sympathy? With this idea in mind, he took up his daily station before the house, watching the pretty face at the window and trusting to fate to bring about the desired acquaintance. One day, as Lizaveta was standing on the pavement about to enter the carriage after the countess, she felt herself jostled and a note was thrust into her hand. Turning, she saw the young officer at her elbow. As quick as thought, she put the note in her glove and entered the carriage. On her return from the drive, she hastened to her chamber to read the missive in a state of excitement mingled with fear. It was a tender and respectful declaration of affection, copied word for word from a German novel. Of this fact, Lisa was, of course, ignorant. Of course. The young girl was much impressed by the missive, but she felt that the writer must not be encouraged. She therefore wrote a few lines of explanation, and at the first opportunity dropped it with the letter out of the window. The officer hastily crossed the street, picked up the papers, and entered a shop to read them. In no wise daunted by this rebuff, he found the opportunity to send her another note in a few days. Of course he did. He received no reply, but evidently understanding the female heart, he persevered, begging for an interview. He was rewarded at last by the following. Oh. Tonight we go to the ambassador's ball. We shall remain until 2:00. I can arrange for a meeting in this way. After our departure, the servants will probably all go out or go to sleep. At 11:30, enter the vestibule boldly, if you see anyone, inquire for the countess. If not, ascend the stairs, turn to the left, and go on until you come to a door which opens into her bedchamber. Enter this room, and behind a screen you will find another door leading to a corridor. From this, a spiral staircase leads to my sitting room. I shall expect to find you there on my return. Herman trembled like a leaf as the appointed hour drew near. He obeyed instructions fully, and as he met no one, he reached the old lady's bedchamber without difficulty. Sorry, I'm getting excited. Instead of going out of the small door behind the screen, however, he concealed himself in a closet to await the return of the old countess. The hours dragged slowly by. At last he heard the sound of wheels. Immediately lamps were lighted and servants began moving about. Finally, the old woman tottered into the room, completely exhausted. Her women removed her wraps and proceeded to get her in readiness for the night. Herman watched the proceedings with a curiosity not unmingled with superstitious fear. When at last she was attired in cap and gown, the old woman looked less uncanny than when she wore her ball gown of blue brocade. I don't think I read that right. I'm sorry. She sat down in an easy chair beside a table, and as she was in the habit of doing before retiring, and her women withdrew. As the old lady sat swaying to and fro, seemingly oblivious to her surroundings, Herman crept out of his hiding place. I get stabbed. At the slight noise, the old woman opened her eyes and gazed at the intruder with a half-dazed expression. Have no fear, I beg of you, said Herman in a calm voice. I have not come to harm you, but to ask a favor of you instead. The countess looked at him in silence, seemingly without comprehending him. Herman thought she might be deaf, so he put his lips close to her ear and repeated his remark. The listener remained perfectly mute. You can make my fortune without it costing you anything, pleaded the young man. Only tell me the 3 cards which are sure to win, and Herman paused as the old woman opened her lips as if about to speak. It was only a jest. I swear to you, it was only a jest, came from the withered lips. There was no jesting about it. Remember Chaplitsky, who, thanks to you, was able to pay his debts? An expression of interior agitation passed over the face of the old woman. Then she relapsed into her former apathy. Will you tell me the names of the magic cards or not? Asked Herman after a pause. There was no reply. The young man then drew a pistol from his pocket, exclaiming, You old witch, I'll force you to tell me! At the sight of the weapon, the countess gave the second sign of life. She threw back her head and put out her hands as if to protect herself. Then they dropped, and she sat motionless. Herman grasped her arm roughly and was about to renew his threats. He saw that she was dead. Of course she was. He scared the life out of her. Seated in her room, still in her ball dress, Lizaveta gave herself up to her reflections. She had expected to find the young officer there. She felt relieved to see that he was not. Strangely enough, that very night at the ball, Tomsky had rallied her about her preference for the young officer, assuring her that he knew more than she supposed he did. Of whom were you speaking? She had asked in alarm, fearing her adventure had been discovered. Of the remarkable man, was the reply. His name is Herman. Lisa made no reply. This Herman, continued Tomsky, is a romantic character. He has the profile of a Napoleon and the heart of a Mephistopheles. It is said he has at least 3 crimes on his conscience. But how pale you are. It is only a slight headache. But why do you talk to me of this Herman? Because I believe he has serious intentions concerning you. Where has he seen me? At church, perhaps, or on the street. The conversation was interrupted at this point, to the great regret of the young girl. The words of Tomsky made a deep impression upon her, and she realized how imprudently she had acted. She was thinking of all this and a great deal more when the door of her apartment suddenly opened, and Herman stood before her. She drew back at the sight of him, trembling violently. Where have you been? She asked in a frightened whisper. In the bedchamber of the countess. She is dead, was the calm reply. My God, what are you saying? Cried the girl. Furthermore, I believe that I was the cause of her death. The words of Tomsky flashed through Lisa's mind. Herman sat down and told her all. She listened with a feeling of terror and disgust. So those passionate letters, that audacious pursuit were not the result of tenderness and love. It was money that he desired. The poor girl felt that she had, in a sense, been an accomplice in the death of her benefactress. She began to weep bitterly. Herman regarded her in silence. "You are a monster," exclaimed Lisa, drying her eyes. "I didn't intend to kill her. The pistol was not even loaded." "How are you going to get out of the house?" inquired Lisa. "It is nearly daylight. I intended to show you the way to a secret staircase while the Countess was asleep, so we would have to cross her chamber. Now I'm afraid to do so." "Direct me and I will find the way alone," replied Herman. I don't know about that. She gave him minute instructions and a key with which to open the street door. The young man pressed the cold, inert hand, then went out. The death of the Countess had surprised no one, as it had long been expected. Her funeral was attended by everyone of note in the vicinity. Herman mingled with the throng without attracting any especial attention. After all, the friends had taken their last look at the dead face. The young man approached the bier. He prostrated himself on the cold floor and remained motionless for a long time. He rose at last with a face almost as pale as that of a corpse itself and went up the steps to look into the casket. As he looked down, it seemed to him that the rigid face returned his gaze mockingly, closing one eye. Did he leave the eyes open, or did like a coin fall? Hmm. He turned abruptly away, made a false step, and fell to the floor. He was picked up, and at the same moment, Lisabetta was carried out in a faint. Why did it sit up? Don't read ahead. Herman did not recover his usual composure during the entire day. He dined alone at an out-of-the-way restaurant and drank a great deal in the hope of stifling his emotion. The wine only served to stimulate his imagination. He returned home and threw himself down on the bed without undressing. During the night, he awoke with a start. The moon shone into his chamber, making everything plainly visible. Someone looked in at the window, then quickly disappeared. Nope. He paid no attention to this, but soon he heard the vestibule door open. He thought it was his orderly, returning late, drunk as usual. The step was an unfamiliar one, and he heard the shuffling sound of loose slippers. The door of his room opened, and a woman in white entered. She came close to the bed, and the terrified man recognized the Countess. "I have come to you against my will," she said abruptly, "but I was commanded to grant your request. The tray, 7, and ace in succession are the magic cards. 24 hours must elapse between the use of each card, and after the 3 have been used, you must never play again." The phantom then turned and walked away. Herman heard the outside door close and again saw the form pass the window. He rose and went out into the hall, where his orderly lay asleep on the floor. The door was closed. Finding no trace of a visitor, he returned to his room, lit his candle, and wrote down what he had just heard. Two fixed ideas cannot exist in the brain at the same time any more than two bodies can occupy the same point in space. The tray, 7, and ace soon chased away the thoughts of the dead woman and all other thoughts from the brain of the young officer. All his ideas merged into a single one: how to turn his advantage to the secret paid for so dearly. He even thought of resigning his commission and going to Paris to force a fortune from conquered fate. Chance rescued him from that embarrassment. Chekalinsky, a man who had passed his whole life at cards, opened a club at St. Petersburg. Uh-huh. His long experience secured for him the confidence of his companions, and his hospitality and general humor conciliated society. The gilded youth flocked around him, neglecting society, preferring the charms of Pharaoh to those of their sweethearts. Naramov invited Herman to accompany him to the club, and the young man accepted the invitation only too willingly. Oh. Oh. Mm. The two officers found the apartments full. Generals and statesmen played whist, young men lounged on sofas eating ices or smoking. In the principal salon stood a long table, at which about 20 men sat playing Pharaoh, the host of the establishment being the banker. He was a man of about 60, gray-haired and respectable. His ruddy face shone with genial humor. His eyes sparkled, and a constant smile hovered about his lips. Naramov presented Herman. The host gave him a cordial handshake, begged him not to stand upon ceremony, and returned to his dealing. More than 30 cards were already on the table. Chekalinsky paused after each coup to allow the punters time to recognize their gains or losses, politely answering all questions and constantly smiling. After the deal was over, the cards were shuffled and the game began again. "Permit me to choose a card," said Herman, stretching out his hand over the head of the portly gentleman to reach a livret. The banker bowed without replying. Herman chose a card and wrote the amount of his stake upon it with a piece of chalk. How much is that?" asked the banker. "Excuse me, sir, but I do not see well." 40,000 rubles, said Herman coolly. All eyes were instantly turned upon the speaker. He has lost his wits, thought Naramov. "Allow me to observe," said Chekalinsky with his eternal smile, "that your stake is excessive." "What of it?" replied Herman, nettled. "Do you accept it or not?" The banker nodded in assent. "I have only to remind you that the cash will be necessary. Of course your word is good, but in order to keep the confidence of my patrons, I prefer the ready money." Herman took a bank check from his pocket and handed it to his host. The latter examined it attentively, then laid it on the card chosen. He began dealing to the right, a 9, to the left, a tray. "The tray wins," said Herman, showing the card he held. A tray. A murmur ran through the crowd. Chekalinsky frowned for a second only, then his smile returned. He took a roll of bank bills from his pocket and counted out the required sum. Herman received it and at once left the table. The next evening saw him at the place again. Everyone eyed him curiously, and Chekalinsky greeted him cordially. He selected his card and placed upon it his fresh stake. The banker began dealing. To the right, a 9. To the left, a 7. Herman then showed his card, a 7 spot. The onlookers exclaimed, and the host was visibly disturbed. He counted out 94,000 rubles and passed them to Herman, who accepted them without showing the least surprise, and at once withdrew. The following evening he went again. His appearance was the signal for the cessation of all occupation, everyone being eager to watch the development of events. He selected his card, an ace. The dealing began. To the right, a queen. To the left, an ace. "The ace wins," remarked Herman, turning up his card without glancing at it. "Your queen is killed," remarked Chekalinsky quietly. Oh, Herman trembled. Looking down, he saw not the ace he had selected, but the queen of spades. He could scarcely believe his eyes. It seemed impossible that he could have made such a mistake. As he stared at the card, it seemed to him that the queen winked one eye at him mockingly. "The old woman!" he exclaimed involuntarily. The croupier raked in the money while he looked on in stupid terror. When he left the table, all made way for him to pass. The cards were shuffled, and the gambling went on. Herman became a lunatic. He was confident the hospital at Obukov, where he spoke to no one, but kept not confident. Herman became a lunatic. He was confined at the hospital at Obukov, where he spoke to no one, but kept constantly murmuring in a monotonous tone, "The tray 7 ace. The tray 7 queen." Oh. Well, guys, I hate to say it, but that is the end of our stories for tonight. I'm so glad you guys hung out for this long. I'm going to go back. I know. And he lost his mind over it. Oh. I hope if I lose my mind, I go quickly like that, though. From like being completely lucid to everything's gone. But that's just in the future. I hope you guys liked the stories tonight. We'll be back, of course, next Wednesday. Thank you, sister. Tomorrow we're gonna try something. So I'm gonna have to play with YouTube and settings and things and see if I can split off from here to a second channel, because I watch a lot of Reddit reactions, and I found a subreddit yesterday, and it's called Moral Dilemmas. So I think we're going to start reading some Reddit stories too, because they crack me up. Some of them are just so ridiculous. And I'm not sure if we're going to do that live or if I'm going to record it. And eventually, I don't know, I'd like to start doing some stuff here too with some sound effects and whatnot, but that is going to take somebody a lot smarter than I am to help me figure out how to do that. Jags. I know, Reddit stories. Oh, I can't. I have to be very careful. Huddles are not good for Reddit stories. I will lose stuff. Live moral dilemmas equal lively discussion. I agree. Oh, Kelly, I'm so glad. Come start hanging out with us on Wednesdays if you're home, because this has been a blast. I'm so happy we are still doing this, and I'm going to start getting all like the way I get with you guys. You know how I am. Live need immediate reactions. Okay. Keep in mind, there's another podcast on Thursdays, so we may have to do it a little earlier so I have time to transition. But I'll meet you guys here tomorrow at 7:30. We'll just meet here. We'll try some Reddit stories. We'll see how it goes. And then that gives me a week to play and see what you guys like. So on that note, I love you guys. I will. And my reminder to you guys, as always, the YouTube reminders: like, share, subscribe, like, share, subscribe, like, share, and subscribe. Or subscribe, like, share. But share, please, please, please. And kind to each other. It doesn't cost anything. It really doesn't hurt that bad. I promise. It's worth it. But I love you guys, and I'll see you soon.